Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's book discussion. My name is Randy, and I'm part of the events team here at the University Bookstore in Seattle. Today, we are excited to have a panel of young adult romance authors here to discuss their latest books. Anna Priemaza will discuss her latest novel, The Forgotten Memories of Vera Glass. Sara Byron will discuss her book, Bend in the Road. And Farah Rishi will talk about her book, It All Comes Back to You. Joining them in conversation will be blogger and web producer Mandy of foreveryoungadult.com. Links to all other books mentioned during the talk will be listed in the chat. So please submit any questions you may have for our panelists in the Q&A link at the bottom of the screen. There will be a brief Q&A session near the end of the discussion. This talk is being recorded and can be viewed on our YouTube channel a few days after the event. And now, here's Mandy to begin our discussion. Welcome, Mandy.
Thanks, Randy. Hey, everyone. I'm Mandy, as Randy said. My pronouns are she, her. And I think I'd like to get started with the authors telling us a little about themselves and about their latest books. Anna, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Anna Primazza, as Randy said and pronounced it perfectly, which was impressive. This is my third book that came out just yesterday, actually. So exciting week. I am an author of, my previous books were Cat and Meg Conquer the World and Fan the Fame, and The Forgotten Memories of Vera Glass, which, as I said, came out yesterday, is about teen Vera has this sense that she is forgetting something. So she just has this feeling of grief and loss, but doesn't know why, and feels like she might be forgetting something or someone really important. So when she finds out that her best friend has the same kind of feelings, they set out to try to discover why they're both feeling this way. It's a really hard book to talk about without spoilers, so I have to be very vague in a lot of things. Yeah, that's me. That's my book.
Thanks, Anna. Farah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Vera Rishi. I wrote It All Comes Back to You, which is my latest. That came out a couple months ago. And I also wrote I Hope You Get This Message, which is a young adult sci-fi. When I'm not writing or attempting to write, I guess I am living in Philadelphia. I play a lot of video games, is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. And yeah, that's all about me. What else should I add? I don't know.
What about your book?
Book. Quick summary. Yes, my book. I was trying to think about like what it's actually about, and it's been like a year since I've read it. So It All Comes Back to You is about Kitten, who is reeling from the loss of her mother and is really looking forward to getting to live with her family again, including her big sister. But then she finds out that her big sister is actually getting married, and worst of all, she's getting married to her ex's older brother, and she did not leave her ex on good terms. Her ex actually ghosted her. So she's kind of angry and has a lot of questions as to why he left, especially right before her mother passed away. So the two of them are actually butting heads now, not just based on the emotional undertones of their past relationship, but also because Gideon does not want this wedding to happen, and Dean really, really wants this wedding to happen. So lots of hijinks, lots of angst and anger, but also a lot of fun rom-com banter.
Thanks, Vera. And last but not least, Sara.
All right. I'm Sara Byron. I live in Wisconsin on the shores of Lake Michigan, and my book, Bend in the Road, came out at the end of September. It's my third YA romance. My previous two novels are The Last Thing You Said and Cold Day in the Sun. And all of my books take place in Minnesota, where I lived my entire life until about 18 months ago when I moved to Wisconsin, which you think like, oh, they can't be that different, and they actually are. So I work for, I work as a communication specialist for a local school district here, which is a newer career for me. I just left an ad agency that I had been at for a very long time as well. So Bend in the Road is a dual POV, which I believe we're going to be talking about later. And it is about Gabe, who is the son of a very famous rock star who is also kind of navigating his own rocky career as a rock musician. And he leaves LA to kind of escape some controversy and some embarrassing situations that are going on, and a very public dumping by his by his girlfriend. And he escapes to the family farm in northern Minnesota and learns that he is inheriting that farm. And on that farm, he meets Juniper, who is the other main character and other point of view character. And she is very stubborn, and she does not like change, and she does not like Gabe coming to the farm. And so it's kind of what happens when she finds out he's inheriting the farm and possibly selling the farm.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And also thank you for, like, a little segue to our first question for all of you. Because as Sarah had mentioned, her book and also Vera's book both have dual POVs, and Anna's also written dual POVs in the past. So I was wondering if you all have any specific approaches to get into the mindset of your specific characters. Like, do you use like a different playlist, different music? Do you, I don't know, if you're writing something angsty, do you like sit in a dark corner? Whatever it is you do, right? Anna, do you want to go first again?
Oh gosh. So the reason I say oh gosh is because the book that just came out yesterday is single point of view. It's all in Vera's point of view. But the previous two books, so Fan the Fame is 3 points of view, and Cat and Meg Conquer the World is in the perspective of Cat and Meg. I found my process for getting in these characters' heads were very different in the two books. And I was trying to think why that was. And I realized it's because in Cat and Meg Conquer the World, the story, it's basically a shared story by Cat and Meg. And I'm really just jumping back and forth from perspectives to tell the same story. But in Fan the Fame, it's 3 sort of unrelated characters who each have their own story, and they each have their own mission. And so I am normally very much a pantser, and I think with Cat and Meg Conquer the World, I would just sort of, I don't know, there was no magic to it. I would just be like, okay, I'm gonna write Cat now, and okay, I'm gonna write Meg now. But with the other 3, I had I'm not normally a big plotter, but I had sort of little graphs for myself about who was doing what when and what their overarching, and I have just sort of page after page where I would sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to write in Sam's point of view right now. And what are his goals? What are his, just trying to get in his head. And I found that kind of journaling a little bit really helpful for me. I'm curious. So you guys, sort of Farah and Sara, your books are both telling the same story, but there's a lot of different things going on in each of your character stories. So I'm curious how you found it switching back and forth.
My first book was also dual POV, and it was about 2 teens who have a shared grief. And I swore after that book that I would never do it again. And,
Why?
And then I didn't. My second book is just single. And then when I started writing this book, these 2 characters both just really had their own voices and they're just really wanted to tell their own sides of the story. And so there I was again, writing this dual POV, which is really hard. I mean, it's hard enough to write the one character arc, right? Like you have to show growth of one character, and then you're doing it for 2 or 3 or however many, and that can get really ugly. And so I guess, and when I write, I don't go into it with a plan. I am also very much a pantser. And I write whatever I feel like writing that day. So it's just whatever idea I happen to have in my head. And so it could be Juniper, it could be Gabe or whatever. And I don't write in order. And so I guess just to kind of, I don't really do anything special to get into character. I think about what I'm going to be writing a lot before I actually start writing it. So for example, I have a lot of really great ideas in the shower in the morning, and then I have to go to work. And then that really blocks that whole creative process, right? So kind of in the back of my head all day, I'm thinking about which scene I'm going to be writing, and then just kind of try to think about who that character is and what they're going to do.
Yeah. How about you, Sara?
It's fascinating hearing everyone's like different approaches to it. So I plot like pretty heavily. Like I have literally, there's like a giant like 4-page outline sitting next to me that I have to go through again. And like for every chapter, I kind of have like a little paragraph of like what characters need to do. I'm lucky because this new book is only 1 POV, but it all comes back to you. That was 2 POVs, and I hope to get this message was 3. So when I outlined, in order to be able to jump into each character's head, I find that for me, music really affects me deeply. Like when I was growing up, my brother used to play piano. So like for some reason, like music just affects me, puts me into that creative mindset pretty quickly. So for every chapter throughout my outline, I would assign like a song that was specific to that character. And sometimes a song would just be specific to the character and what they might be feeling, or maybe it's just like a general place in the story at that moment. But that's the thing that like usually helped like trigger that mindset in me. So yeah, it's always music. Sometimes like I will also have these like playlists, and I'll go on like a really, really long walk. There's something about walking through a city with music blasting in your ears that really like gets me into a creative mode as well. So that is like my backup way to do it. So yeah, music is very helpful for me.
Mandy is the one who's asking all the questions, but I constantly, as you guys are both talking, it's so interesting to hear others' point of views. And so I'm going to refrain from asking too many questions, because I feel like I could also fire like a million questions at you.
No, go for it.
But a couple. Farah, I was really interested in your mentioning that you choose a song for every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for me, that would be such a risky procrastination thing. I feel like I could spend hours and hours choosing the perfect song. How do you stop that from happening?
So I listen to music like all the time. And I think when I'm listening to music, I'm just like, oh, this would be a really good song for like Dean for this like particular moment. And so I kind of like quickly just like shelf it away. So I already have like the playlist ready to go essentially. But if like in the moment when I'm sitting down to write and I have to think like, oh crap, I need to find a song for this, then like God help me, because then I go on YouTube trying to find it's a disaster. So I have to do a lot of pre-planning, or else, oh my God, I get distracted by everything. Like if it wasn't for like these distraction apps on my computer, I'd be a goner.
That makes perfect sense.
I feel like I would want to like listen to an audiobook with like Farah's playlist. You know what I mean? Because like, I want to hear the exact sounds of like, yes, I see. Like,
yeah, I have them all on Spotify now, so I'm just like, maybe I should send them out.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when authors provide like more ways to just kind of, I don't know, like integrate themselves into the story. I find it like really interesting, because I'll think that there's something going on in a chapter and I'll feel a certain way, but then the author will probably have like a different perspective sometimes, and it's like really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also on this topic of like dual POVs, it actually makes me think like, oh, and especially with Farah's book, it really helps to kind of, you know, I guess make your characters more sympathetic, because like we said, like Dean does like a pretty bad thing. It's like he ghosted her, like that's awful. But it's interesting because as I was reading it, I was like, I don't hate him probably as much as I should. And I thought it was really interesting that, Farah's book and also Sarah's, you both have leads who have, there is a lot of history between them. And so you kind of have to start them off at this like really rough place, but then you also have to be like, okay, we gotta put you together for the kids kissing. So I guess it's like, how do you kind of work around and like through that conflict, right? While still keeping your characters still like relatable and sympathetic, right? Despite all that baggage. I don't know, Sarah, do you want to go first? Or
I really like to write fighting, arguing, there's just something about dialogue in those really tense moments. I just love writing those scenes almost as much. Sometimes I think even a little bit more, but I think that, it's just a part of life, right? Like you don't always see eye to eye with someone. And so I don't know that it, I guess I kind of went into the book knowing that they were not going to get along right away. And that there was going to be this big tension between them. But I also knew how it would end, right? Because I write young adult romance. So it's, there's going to be maybe not happily ever after, but there will be happy for now. And so I knew that I'm going to start at point A where they, can't stand each other. And we're going to end up, over here. And so it's just a matter of kind of keeping that level of tension going, just knowing that they're going to end up where they'll end up. Sorry, spoiler.
Yeah, Farah, what about you? Yeah.
It's so funny because like when I was first envisioning Biren and Dean, so obviously they butt heads throughout the entire book, and they both do some pretty like progressively worse and worse stuff to each other in order to reach their goal. And so like if I don't find anything to cling to or to like about them, then I'm not going to be able to write the book, even though like my initial perception of these characters is that, oh my God, they're awful. They're terrible. Like both of them do and say and think some pretty awful things. But I, as a reader, I think I always love unlikable characters because at some point I'm probably going to like something about them. There has to be that thing that you just like gravitate to where it's like, yeah, they do some bad things, but like, I can understand why, or, they're put in this horrible position. And isn't it also just fascinating to watch the story unfold and stuff like that. So before I even sit down to write the book, I have to have this like fully conceived idea of them, not just as like a trope or, I shouldn't only be able to list bad things about them and why I dislike them. At some point, I, as the author, have to figure out, okay, yeah, they suck and a lot of readers might hate them, but like, why is there something more to them? Why does their story deserve to be told? And once I've convinced myself of that, then I feel like I can start to give them a little bit more of like a roundedness to them. And then again, like the music does help too, because even if, a character does bad things, if you really can like scratch away at the veneer and see what's really inside, I feel like there's something like that is relatable. It's like Dean as a character, he ghosts his girlfriend and keeps a lot of secrets from her, which to me as like a girl who has like, dealt with like bad boys in the past, I was like, oh, I hate him. Like he's terrible. But at some point you have to be like, oh, but yeah, he's done some bad things, but also like he means well and he doesn't know how to communicate, all of that stuff. And once you can start to do that, then like you start to get a little bit more of a likable character. And then that conflict that you're working to resolve within yourself, that I feel like feeds into the conflict between the two characters. Like, okay, the reasons why I disliked Dean at first are going to be the same reasons why Gideon would dislike Dean. And now I get to play with all of those things that I've just dealt with like on the page.
Yeah.
You played that off so well, and I love hearing how you handled it, because you really nailed exactly that. Like when I was reading, I just found they were both. I just had this constant feeling of like, why am I rooting for either of these people? They're doing such terrible things, but I was rooting for them. I was rooting for them to be together. I was rooting for them individually, and yet at the same time, they were constantly frustrating me. So
Yeah.
I think you pulled that off beautifully.
I agree. And I also feel like, and I felt this way about my own characters too. Like I felt really protective of them. Like I knew that they were going through some really horrible stuff. And I mean, like, something just happened in my base, in like right below me in the garage. So
Oh gosh. Everyone's okay.
Sorry about that. It was very loud. The 3-point plan, right? And so then like just the things that were going to happen to try to prevent this wedding from happening. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but
It's fine.
I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's doing this. But at the same time, I felt really protective of her. And I just knew what she had been going through and the grief that she was feeling and how awful she must have felt when Dean ghosted her and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I agree. I think you just did it so well, because yeah, why should we root for these characters? But that's what keeps us turning the pages, right? So just to have those pieces of it, it was just amazing.
Thank you. Plus I just love watching trash fires unfold. It's like that's part of it too, right? Like the messier it is, the more I'm like, I need to know how this is going to resolve, because it's getting worse and worse and worse. So how is it ever going to get resolved? There's no way. And then you got to keep turning the pages. And that's what I love about these like dual POVs, where you see both sides and you're like, oh my God, how?
Well,
Yeah,
and too, with yours, there's that third layer too, right? Of what we know, something that's going on, but they don't know that it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
I think Mandy has a question for us about that a little bit later anyways.
Yes, we
So
do.
we'll talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it now too if we wanted to get into that first. But yeah, like, so in Farah's book, there's a little, I guess, like a subplot going on where main characters don't know that they're kind of like in an online, friendship, situationship with each other. And then also like in Anna's book, right? It's like the reader is privy to a lot more information than the characters are. So I'm just wondering how you manage to do that to, you have to kind of do two things at once. You got to keep the characters in the dark, but then you got to make it so the readers aren't like, oh my goodness, figure it out already. Like, please, kind of thing, right? So yeah, how did you go about, knowing, I guess, how much to divulge and how much to play it close? Fair?
For me, I feel like I didn't at first. I had no idea. And that was actually something that I really, really struggled with for the first like draft or two, I think. And then what ended up happening was I had to keep going back and like layering and picking out things and stuff like that to kind of make it a little bit more realistic. Because yeah, you're right. Like nothing is worse than when you're reading a book and you're just like, oh my God, like hurry up, like figure this out. So yeah, it is balancing all of this information, right? Like how much do you give to the reader as you don't overwhelm them or confuse them, and like what exactly it is that they need to know. And that's, oh my God, that's where editors come in, right? Like editors and beta readers and like, oh my poor, I have like a fainting couch like right next to me where I write, and my poor husband like sits there and just like listens to me just go blah 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 about the book, and having an extra set of brains, I guess, to help with the balancing information. I mean, that's the only way I'd be able to do it. I have no like organic way of figuring it out. I have to just do my best.
Anna, what about you? How did you?
So, I mean, I knew that was going to be something I would have to worry about right from the start of this book. So this Forgotten Memories of Vera Glass, actually, the whole idea started with the idea that the reader would know more than the characters. So this, the entire, as this book first came to me, it was, what if characters are disappearing from the pages of the book and the reader knows it's happening and the characters don't? And that was where I started from in writing this book. And so I was very aware right from the start of the potential of, whenever a reader knows something more than the characters, there's that risk that it's going to be frustrating. But I think the reason that what I really tried to do from the start is, although the reader knows what's happening, the reader does not know why it's happening. So there is, like, Vera is on this mission to solve this mystery. And although you know more about the mystery than her, you still have no idea why the mystery is or what the cause is of the mystery. And so having that bit that the reader doesn't know, I found was sort of the key part that I think helped me to pull it off. My agent says I pulled it off. She told me she's told me multiple times that when I first told her this idea, she was like, oh, great. But in her head, she was thinking, you're not going to be able to pull that off. But she told me she was wrong. So
it was the like trippiest read, and I mean that in like the best way. Like, I feel like there's a pleasure pain balance with these kind of books too, where you do have that like really intense mystery. It's like hot sauce. You want a little bit, but you don't want too much. And for this in particular, the whole time I was just like, my head hurts, but I love it. It was so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely a good description of it. There are moments where I mean, it's funny that, Farah, you have a fainting couch, because I could have used that, because I was a moment, I was like, like, I don't know what got over me. It was just, very dramatic.
Yes.
Okay, so to change topics like a little bit entirely. So one of the ways that all of your books are connected are having common themes of grief and loss. And so, like, did you find it challenging to access these emotions? Like, was writing about it like cathartic and healing maybe? Sara, do you want to start?
Sure. So there are definitely elements of that in this book. And I guess I just want to preface this by saying that the majority of this book was written during a pretty difficult time in my life personally. You know, the whole pandemic thing, and we were talking about this before the webinar actually started, but we moved. So in June of 2020. So kind of at that, still kind of in those beginning stages, but everything was really shut down, and we pulled our kids out of school to move to a different state. And then my older child was a senior last year. And so he actually moved back to Minnesota and lived with friends to finish his senior year at his high school. And my daughter started school here virtually, and we didn't know anybody, and I never left the house because I was working from home. And we had a puppy who died in an really unexpected kind of tragic way, and it was very, very hard. And I was also on deadline and trying to really do some really significant rewrites for this book. And so a lot of it, was it cathartic? I don't know that it was. I feel like some of it, I was sort of in a bit of a fog when I was writing it too. So my first book is really, is about grief. Really, the whole thing is about how two people are handling a shared loss and the grief that they go through. And I would say that for that one, I cried a lot when I wrote that. I actually cried some with this one too, but and I was thinking about this because when I was reading Anna's and Farah's books, And there were these lines that would kind of reach out and grab me and make me think of my own sense of loss and my own experiences of grief. And I was thinking about that when I was 16 or 17 and really dealing with the first big loss of a person who I loved who died. Where were those books then, right? And I think about in Anna's book where they don't know that they have lost something and they feel this weight around her heart. That is just an image that really stayed with me, that there's this weight around her heart. And that sometimes is really what it feels like. And so to have that, and I was thinking about like, what was I reading when I was 16 and I was going through all these, different moments of loss. And it was like Anne Tyler and Gatsby, Great Gatsby and things like that. And so I really feel like it's important that there are books like this out there. And that are sharing this experience from a teen perspective. And so that really doesn't answer the question, I don't think.
I think one of the things, sorry,
no,
one of the things I loved about both your books is, so they, like Sara, I thought of this as you were saying that, your first book is really about grief, whereas this one, there's a lot of grief in it, but it's not about grief. And Farah, your book is really the same way. There's just sort of this like permeating level of grief, but it's not about that. And I thought you both pulled off really well, sort of this feeling of like grief and loss, but also life just somehow keeps us marching on and you keep doing life things, but also grief is happening at the same time. I thought you both portrayed that really well.
Thank you. I think that's a good way of putting it. And that's life, right? You carry that weight, right?
Yeah.
But you still have to like do your laundry.
Yep.
And go to school.
Farah, can we turn it over to you next?
Yeah. No, sorry, I was just thinking about that. For me, when I was reading your book and that first scene where they're all eating dinner at the dinner table and Vera has this like sense that there's someone else that's supposed to be sitting at the table just for like a brief moment. Oh my God, that killed me, because that's exactly so when I was writing It All Comes Back to You, my mother had just passed away. And there was like that moment. I think everyone who's lost someone in their family has gone through this moment of like when you sit at the dinner table and the person that's supposed to be sitting in that chair isn't there anymore. So that like really, really resonated with me. And for It All Comes Back to You, yeah, that was very much the underlying thing, but I didn't want to focus it because when you focus on like a loss like that, it's almost too dangerous to get too close because I feel like it can get really overwhelming. At least that's how I felt. You talk to your friends about it, you talk to your therapist about it when you have that like specified time to, but then you need to pull yourself away because otherwise, I don't know, it's just like a dangerous thing to just keep focusing on. So with this book, grief became that underlying layer where the characters would kind of touch upon it, but then they would have to keep marching on. And it's like, if you see your characters doing that in a way, it's like inspiring to you as well. Like, yeah, okay, maybe it's not like real or whatever, but I mean, in that moment when you're writing it, by necessity, it does feel real. These characters feel real. So like watching Gideon, I think experiencing very much the same things that I had just finished experiencing, I guess, and I'm still experiencing. I think it was cathartic. It wasn't like a magical like, aha, I feel so much better after writing this, but it was like, I don't know, soothing in a way to feel not alone. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why like I want to write, is because for a moment as I'm writing this book, I don't feel alone. I have this whole like cast of characters that are sitting with me and always with me. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And that actually kind of relates like to my next question of like,
Nice.
Yeah. Exactly.
Love when that happens.
Right? when you were talking about the feelings of like, oh, not feeling alone and everything, right? I thought about how in Vera's book and in Anna's book, both of your protagonists have a really, or I guess I should phrase it, like faith and religion are really important in their lives, right? In a way that is like, it is not the plot, but obviously it's so important to them and it is a factor in their everything they do. And, and obviously like writing itself is already so personal. And then to add this on top of it, I feel like, yeah, you're just like sharing so much of yourself. And so I'm just wondering, and especially for you, Farah, like, especially since you're writing from an experience that is often like so underrepresented and also like poorly represented in pop culture, right?
Yes.
Like you feel kind of like, trepidation or pressure or just kind of like, oh man, like what am I doing? Like, I don't know. Or just, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So it's funny, like religion obviously plays a part in my life and therefore in my writing, but it's not like something that I'm constantly thinking about. And it's like not, I don't wake up and I'm like, today I'm a Muslim, let's do Muslim things. It's always, it's like yet another layer that like pops up in your life when it needs to. And that's kind of how it is for these characters. I didn't want it to be a book that was about just like Muslimness, period. It's just kind of like these are kids who are living their lives who also just happen to be Muslim, and are also clearly grappling, in the case of Dean, like grappling with aspects of that, but that's like just a piece of him. But yeah, when you're writing from that underrepresented like perspective, it's also really terrifying because there's very little representation and you're adding to this very tiny amount that's out there. And am I doing a good job? Like, am I putting us in a poor light? And it stinks that you have to think about that, but in a way you do kind of have, that's the reality, because there's, people are not exposed to that kind of representation very often. So when you put that out there, you want to make sure that you're doing a good job and representing your community in a good light, I guess. But at the same time, you also want to be true to yourself and your own experience. And, you don't want to like compromise that either. So excuse me, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? The audacity. This is my personal assistant and she's the worst. She's like 50 years old. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that pressure was definitely there, but at the end of the day, I can't compromise the book and the integrity of the story. So I just decided like, I'm just going to focus on what I need to write and how I need to write it and, leave it at that and hope for the best. That's really all you can do.
Yeah, no, and again, it's like, I think you definitely pulled it off, right? Because I mean, there's no really ideal, like, okay, this is the perfect whatever, right? There's one way to be, right? And that's,
exactly. Yeah, and Anna, you did a great job too, actually. Like, it was awesome to see like Vera constantly like thinking about that, or not constantly, I guess every so often it would crop up. It reminded me a little bit of Gideon as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess to go back and sort of answer Mandy's question of feeling trepidation or pressure about how it might be received, or any kind of nervousness. I mean, so Vera is she's Christian, right? And so this is to put a North American audience who are a majority Christian, that's the majority faith in North America. So I don't have the same, it's a completely different type of thing than what you're writing, Farah. But at the same time, I have found over the last few years, I have read a number of books with characters who sort of faith is this sort of intertwining thing in their life. And regardless of what faith, so I actually finished reading your book the same day that I finished reading Beyond the Map Stars by Rosalind Eves, which has a Muslim, a Mormon main character. And there's Agnes at the End of the World, which has a character who's in a pretty severe cult. I've read a number of books that have, and yours, of course, that I just find I really relate to those characters, all of them. I find that there's something about, the way that faith and that religion intertwines into these characters' lives that feels very familiar to me. That I'm like, oh yeah, that I found it funny that both our characters talked about being in youth group. It's just sort of this like very different experience, and also this huge commonality between them that I really enjoyed. I think one of the reasons, so Vera Glass, writing that aspect of it, one of the things I really wanted to pull out was this mixture of science and religion. So Vera's parents are both scientists, but they're also very religious. And these are often things that are thought of as very different. And I did not find all of that difficult to write or nerve-wracking to write, because I think most of it is just who I am now as a person. It is not who I was as a teen. And I feel like I'm like gradually building to writing that book of me as a teen. And I think that one is going to be very difficult to write. So I grew up in a very conservative, very unheard of conservative Christian sect that most people have never heard of. That is a very different experience than Vera's. And I feel like that one is going to be tough to write because it's going to be so personal, and it's going to be who I was at a really vulnerable time in my life. And I'm going to be worrying about portraying this experience in a positive way, in a nuanced way. And I feel like you probably, in writing this, were thinking about all of those things, whereas I was just writing about, the fairly typical modern Christianity. So at this point, I didn't have to worry about that. But I really, thinking about that book I want to write eventually, I really admire what you've put into your book.
Thanks. It's also really fascinating how like the closer a character is to you, how much harder it becomes to write.
Yes, definitely. I found so Mandy, I didn't really answer your grief question before, and so one thing I wanted to throw in there really quickly is one of the things that I have found easiest that makes it easiest to write about characters is when they have shared experiences with me that are also quite different than me. So in my first book, Cat and Meg Conquer the World, Cat deals with a lot of anxiety, and people have often, and I have an anxiety disorder and problems with panic attacks, and people have often asked me if that was hard to write or cathartic to write. And for me, Cat has the same symptoms as me, but she does not have the same triggers. And so similarly in Vera Glass, I find like Vera experiences a lot of similar emotions, and I feel like a lot of what she experiences is grief, and sort of this amorphous grief I experience as sort of this amorphous anxiety that is undefined, that I was really tapping into when talking about it. But as far as I know, I have not had anyone disappear from my life and suddenly be able to not be able to remember who they are.
Remember.
As far as I know, so I think it helps to have that sort of a bit of distance from your character's experience.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have a lot of distance from that, because that would be a particularly terrible story to relate to on an emotional level.
I mean, maybe we all do. Maybe we,
Oh my God, stop. I'll cry. That'd be horrible.
I mean, the farther you get from high school and then you get these, Facebook friend requests, like there are times where I have to email a classmate and say like, did we graduate with this person? Or
so funny. So in a way.
A little different, but.
I think I only have time for one last question. So this is for everybody, because this is like, I don't know. I just think that you spend so much time like creating these worlds, and I'm always interested in like the world building that doesn't make it onto the page. So like, for example, like for Sara, like I want to know, like, okay, have you thought of like Gabe's entire like discography? Because I know he has like, the one good album, the one bad album, but like, what are the songs? What does he sound like? Does his fandom have a name? Like all those details.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you would bring that up, because his dad's band became a real thing. So when I was writing this book, I said to my husband, hey, I need a name for like a 90s grunge band that, kind of faded from the spotlight and then made a big comeback. And we were listening to Alice in Chains at the time. And so he was like, oh, Dig Me Under. And so the next thing I know, he is like putting a band together called Dig Me Under. They're writing songs, recording. They 3 years to the day before this book came out, they released the album. And it's on vinyl and CD, and it's streaming on Spotify. And like, he has this whole story that he's telling that's different from what's in the book, but the lead singer is fictional, right? So one of his friends kind of stepped in as the lead singer. But as far as Gabe goes, nobody has like really touched that. So then I was thinking about this today, like, what does he sound like? Because his dad, so who is a character in the book, and his name is Chris, he was sort of, in my head, he was a little bit like Chris Cornell. And so I really hadn't thought about who Gabe would sound like, but I think I landed on it, and it's just going to be like, let's just focus on the musical aspect of it and not all the other bizarro stuff. Jared Leto.
Okay.
Amazing.
I know, it's like now we have to like reread with like, okay, that in mind. Yeah. And for Farah, like, I'm so curious, like, have you thought about like how Cambria works, like the whole gameplay? Like, tell me everything.
Too much. This is a terrible question, and that it's the best question because I won't shut up, but I will do my best. Yeah, I did. Actually, I think I thought about Cambria before I thought about the book. I was like, wouldn't it be cool? And my husband was like, go to bed. But yeah, so, do you know Pokemon? It's essentially like Pokemon, but like if Pokemon could turn into Gundams. So that was my whole thing. I think I needed to sleep, and it was just like, wouldn't that be neat if you could like catch these animals, but they're not real animals, they're like mecha animals, and through your power of friendship they would transform into giant Gundams that you can then pilot and then fight with. And it like gets rid of the whole, okay, well, they're not real animals, so it's not like animal abuse or anything like that, but also you're in a Gundam, so you're all powerful, which is really awesome. Yeah, so I played a lot of MMOs in high school. Which is also kind of what helped inspire the book. And so that's what I was thinking about, like, wouldn't it be really cool if everyone had different animals, and, based on like your personality, you would pilot like a different kind of mech. So like, I'd probably be stuck with like a mouse or something small and pathetic, and other people could have like, I don't know, a leopard mech or something. And yeah, the difference between I think you were going to ask the difference between the standard and the expansion pack.
Yes.
Yeah. So to me, that was like, oh, it would introduce another like 150 different kinds of animals that you could like capture in Cambria. And that's why Gideon and Dean waste their lives playing this game, because it's amazing. And I want to too.
Right? I know, because at first I was like, well, maybe you don't want to tell us too much, because like you should sell that idea.
I know, right? Like game companies, hit me.
Exactly.
Want it.
Sarah, I feel like you and I need to talk video game creation at some point. I don't know if you know this. I don't think you've read my other 2 books.
No, I haven't.
But they revolve around a made up video game, Legends of the Stone.
Oh my God. So where's our game company?
Right. We need
to do this.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah, YA game company. Let's do
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. And then for Anna, like, okay, so, in the book, we hear about these 72 aptitudes a lot. Like, do you have a list of all of them? Like, and also like, yeah, what would you, I know they're supposed to be like at random, but like, what would you want to have? And yeah, and then also like, did you, because some characters you mentioned like, okay, they have this aptitude. Oh wait, I don't know if we actually mentioned what aptitudes are. Like, my bad.
no, we didn't.
But okay, but yeah, and yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So Forgotten Memories of Vera Glass. So my first two books are fully contemporary. And this one, I took a little bit of a fantasy twist. Every character has pulling this like science and stuff together. Every character has what's called an aptitude, which is basically like one little bit of magic, one little thing that they can do. So Vera's best friend has light magic, so she can throw her hand up and turn on a light. And there's twins in the book who have taste magic and so salt magic and sugar magic, basically. So one can make things salty and one can make things sweet. And they joke about, the one guy in the friend group, one of the characters will pass her tea over to him to make it sweet for her, and the other teen will joke about, make sure you don't pass it to the wrong teen, I'll make it salty. So question of, there's 72, this is a scientific world where they've mapped out all of the aptitudes, and her parents are studying sort of the genes and science related to aptitudes. And the question, so did I come up, there are 72 known aptitudes. I did not know what they are. I'm not a plotter. I just came up with them on the spot. When I got to a character and I needed an aptitude, I'd sit there and be like, taste. Okay, we'll do taste. So no, I don't know what the 72 are. I'm not that kind of writer. I'm not someone with like spreadsheets and all sorts of things. I just go with it.
Okay, then why 72? Where did that come from? You were just like number out of a hat, or?
I mean, it couldn't be like 100. That wouldn't seem natural, like it had to, because it was genetic, it had to feel like, I don't know, 72 felt like a reasonable number.
Why does that make sense? That actually makes sense to me. Like, so I buy that. Also, I really want a sleep aptitude.
Sleep aptitude.
That's
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it works since like there's no like list, right? So we just fill in the blanks ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. You can, if you can imagine it, it's probably on the list. I did have to, so I categorized them all, and that was tricky, not knowing what the aptitudes were to make up categories for non-existent aptitudes. But if I was to have an aptitude, I would want intuition magic, which
same. I know.
That's mom has. Yeah, just sort of just having this sense of what needs to happen. It's a little bit like telling the future, but not really knowing why you're telling the future or how. So
that's a good one.
Agreed. I think that is all the questions I have. I don't know if Randy, if you wanted to hop in here or.
Okay, here I am. So we have one question from Lauren, who asks all of you, what is your dream writing environment and why?
That's a good one. I saw someone post a picture actually of one of those like tiny houses. I can't remember for the life of me who the author was, and I don't think I would have anyway, because I was too busy looking at their amazing little tiny house that they had in their backyard, and they lived in like this deep woods, foresty area, like old growth. And I think it had just snowed, and they did like a whole like video thing, and it was just like a little tiny house in the woods, super comfy. They like turned on a space heater. They had their big like Labrador retriever sitting next to them, and they were writing, and I was like, that right there, that's the dream. No offense to my dog, who isn't a Labrador retriever, but.
What about you, Sarah?
Well, I love a good tiny house as well.
Yes.
And I follow a lot of those accounts on social media. So that's a time suck as well. All I need is my laptop and probably a blanket and my dog sitting next to me. I would say I can really write anywhere. I've written like at parades that my kids have been in the marching band in because I was on deadline. I have written at swimming lessons. I have written in the car. I can write anywhere. But what I really need is time. And so it would be, I find that I'm most creative in the morning. And so my ideal writing environment would be writing from like 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. anywhere with my dog. Boom.
I am also more of a morning writing person. I find that's, you hop out of bed and the ideas just start flowing. And as soon as people start talking to me, then it's like the ideas are gone, right? Like people say things and go off, away goes the character who was talking in my head. So I really love writing. This is a complicated question for me because I feel like it makes me face my age and my growing nature as a person, growing as in growing older, not growing like stronger and wiser. Because I used to really, really, really love writing on a beach or at the side of a pool. And my husband and I would, on our vacations, he loves sleeping in. And it was such a wonderful combination because I would get up in the morning and I would go out to the beach or I would go out to the pool and I would write there. I used to love writing there. But I don't know, as I get older, it's so much work to put on sunscreen and then the sun gets kind of hot and I sweat and I feel like just not, I don't know, I'm getting more curmudgeonly in my middle-agedness, I guess. So I don't know. I have a really nice balcony with a swing on it that I like sitting on. That's where I do a lot of my writing, which is quite lovely. So
That sounds so cozy. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for being here. I just have a couple of quick questions. I have about 2 minutes. So Farah, you said when you plot your book, you're set. I mean, you've got your notes and that's what you're going to follow. Do you ever find in the middle of that process, maybe you think, wow, what if I did this? Or does it ever, do you think like right when you're in the middle, do you think maybe, do you ever think that a different twist would take it in a whole new direction?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have to allow myself to do that because as you know, in my head, I have it a certain, I have an idea for how the story will go. And then as I'm actually writing it, realistically speaking, there's, I'll find different ways that I hadn't thought before just by simply writing it down and like seeing in my mind's eye the characters in that space. So definitely like I'm literally going through that right now where I hit maybe 40, 50,000 words. Like I'm smack dab in the middle basically. And it just occurred to me that like, oh no, I need to change some stuff and veer off the outline, which means I have to update my outline and think about it a little bit differently. And that's okay. That's what should happen. I mean, rarely do books, I think, for those who are plotting ever go exactly like, by the book, so to speak. Because yeah, once you're writing it, things will always change and that's good. It's like more of an organic creative process. So I don't know anyone who isn't like at least a little bit of a pantser, if you're a plotter.
Okay, and I have a quick question for Anna. I only have about a minute. You said you came from a very conservative Christian upbringing, and I can relate because I grew up in kind of the middle of Missouri. Do you feel that inhibits your writing? When you're writing a young adult fiction novel, does that upbringing inhibit, or do you think it enhances your writing?
I mean, I could probably talk for an hour on that question, Randy. But I think my life involves a lot of innocence, and my experiences in life. So I am a woman in my 30s who still has never in her life said the F word. And so I don't like, it means that I'm writing a slightly different type of book than a lot of the books that are currently out there. But I think for me, I'm writing that book for other people like me, right? And those people need books too. So basically I'm regularly told I need to age my characters down because they act. I've written them as 17-year-olds, and I'm told no, they're actually they act like 15-year-olds. I'm like, fine, I'll make them 15, even though this is what I was like at 17. And so I think it does make me write a different type of book than some young adult authors today.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all, Anna, Sara, Farah, Mandy. You guys were great. It was fantastic to have you here. I also want to thank tonight's audience and everyone watching the replay on YouTube. Links for everyone's books are on our website, and we hope that you join us again soon. Good night, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Thanks, Mandy.